Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are continuing the chapter 4. Word very soon reached Abba in Bombay. His immediate response was to cry with grief. No more the joy of an anticipated meeting. No more trips to Calcutta or Vrindavana on the plea of business, just to see the tall, commanding form of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, the evangelic angel. This sense of never meeting again was difficult to bear. Philosophically, Abhay knew that there was no reason to lament. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had come into the world to execute the mission of Lord Chaitanya, and now it was required that he leave this place and to go to another, where he would again engage in the same activity. Yet, even armed with this philosophy, Abhay felt all alone. His two great well-wishers were gone, his father and now his spiritual master. But he felt grateful that he had received a special mercy, a final instruction, just 2 weeks before his spiritual master's departure. Abhay read his letter again and again. There would not be another. The intimate talks and meetings were now gone, but by this letter, especially, Abhay would live in the instructions of the Siddhanta Saraswati. The letter had come just in time. Now he knew for certain, no matter what anyone else said, how to please his spiritual master and stay linked with Krishna. Following his order, he would conquer the feeling of loss at the disappearance of his most affectionate well-wisher. Chapter 5. The War. Under the circumstances since 1936 up to now, I was simply speculating whether I shall venture this difficult task, and that without any means and capacity. But as none have discouraged me, I have now taken courage to take up the work. Srila Prabhupada in Back to Godhead magazine. The fire in the Mata broke out almost immediately. A senior disciple said that there should be one Acharya who would be the spiritual successor to Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati and who would perform all initiations and settle all controversies. But Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had never said that. He had never called for a one Acharya, rather, he had instructed the members of Gaudiya Math to form a governing body of 12 men and carry on a concerned effort. But that instruction was abandoned, and the suggestion that there be one leader took hold. A single person instructor should take charge, and now it became a rush for who? Two parties contested. Ananta Vasudeva, one of the Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's leading preachers, was ambitious and he pressed his claim with a group of influential sannyasi supporters. Another man, Kunja Vihari, shrewdly went after the properties. He had been leading administrator unless under Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, and now he claimed ownership of the Palatial temple in Calcutta as well as all the other properties and assets of India-wide Gaudiya Math. Although in his will, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta had expressed his desire that his disciples select a governing board to manage all the properties and funds of Gaudiya Math. Kunjavihari contested the will's legitimacy. He and his supporter argued that since Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had received the properties on behalf of God, he was not their rightful owner and therefore could not determine their future ownership. Thus, he and others disputed over the legal and theological aspects of the former Acharya's position. Shortly after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's passing away, litigation had begun. Ananta Vasudeva, supported by majority of the members of the Gaudiya Math, had claimed that he, as the next Acharya, was the owner and director of the properties. But although Kunjavihari had only a few supporters, he defied the majority by pressing his claim through lawyers in court. Kunjavihari and his men had possession of the Chaitanya Math and the temples in Mayapur. Vasudeva party captured other buildings. Quarreling and fist fights broke out. The preaching of the Gaudiya Math stopped. Abhai's inability to take part in activities of Gaudiya Math was suddenly in his favor. He had always been more a visitor than a member of the Mata, and at least externally, more the Grihastha businessman than a missionary worker. This automatically put him at a distance from the frame. Of course, he was associated with the matas in Bombay and Allahabad, but he had no managerial position, no claims to ownership, and no role in litigation. Nor did he decide to take sides in the struggle for power. Like many of the other disciples, he was mortified to see that his spiritual master's instructions for cooperation had been disregarded and his mission thrown into a legal dispute. Abba knew that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had wanted the leaders to work cooperatively, and so he would not sympathize with the warring factions. Both parties were an insult to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. But he wanted to preach, although becoming a very good English preacher was something he was meditating on more than actively doing. The Gaudiya Math would logically have been the vehicle for his preaching. He had already contributed articles to Gaudiya Math's publications and had been working with his god brothers at the Allahabad and Bombay centers. Naturally, thought of serving his spiritual master in terms of serving within his spiritual master's mission. But Gaudiya Math, which had always been known for pure, bold preaching of the message of Lord Chaitanya, was now becoming known for embroiled factions. As the Gaudiya Mata broke down, he was also affected. Under the present circumstances, he could be, how could he carry out his spiritual master's orders to preach? Previously, the main obstacle to his preaching had been family commitments, but now the obstacles were compounded. Now he had to wait helplessly for the outcome of the struggle. What would Krishna bring out? 1938, his Bombay business diminishing. Abhay, now 42, moved back to Calcutta with his wife and family and rented a house at 6 Sita Kanta Banerjee line. The street was but a narrow lane, lined on either side with three-story houses. His office was on the first floor, facing the street. The family lived upstairs. He rented the adjoining building, number 7, on the first floor, operated a small chemical laboratory manufacturing distilled water. They spent liniment, Vimal tonic, alpha, an injection for boils, and various other medicines. Also utilized a small outbuilding in the rear as part of his lab. Out front, he hung a large signboard, Abhay Charan and Sons, displaying a picture of mustached Abhay Charan. Sometimes he would employ 2 or 3 servants to assist him, but mostly he worked alone. He would deliver his glass jugs of distilled water to agents such as Bengal Company and Clusconet. He printed a brochure advertising the pain, liniment, and good for relieving gout, rheumatism, and all pains. And if one wanted to be free of recurring diseases like rheumatism and gout, Abhay Brocher directed that in addition to using days pain liniment, one should refrain from alcohol and all sorts of drinking, intoxicating habits, and food and drink should be very simple and innocent, such as vegetables and milk. I think we can stop here. So today we completed chapter 4 title How Shall I Serve You? In the chapter, I think Srila Prabhupada said, never ask my spiritual master a question except one. How shall I serve you? And I have every hope that you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher if you serve the mission to inculcate the novel impression of Lord Chaitanya's teaching to the people in general as well as philosophers and religionists. Was spoken by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in his letter to Srila Prabhupada in 1936. And I think 2 weeks before Srila Bhaktisiddhanta disappeared from this world, I think he gave an instruction. I advise all to preach teachings of Rupa Raghunatha, disciples of Lord Chaitanya, with all the energy and resources. Our ultimate goal shall be become the dust of lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Raghunatha Goswami. And also he said, like after his demise, you know, sannyasis with well can have a governing body and make all the decisions and run the Gaudiya Math. But if you look at the chapter 5, title of the war, you know, so now, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's instruction was not followed, and There are two factions, both are fighting for, their own case. And I think under these circumstances, uh, Srila Prabhupada is saying that I was simply speculating whether I shall venture this difficult task and that without any means and capacity, but as none have discouraged me, I have now taken the courage to take up the work. This is what Prabhupada mentioned in the Back to Guarded magazine.